Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us on the Lincoln Institute podcast. I was just talking to you a little bit. We always discuss about the weekly stuff going on and kind of get some of our takes. One of the very first ones that this week that we saw, just interesting one, was Bill 2751. Basically saying here in Sacramento, they basically said that business owners, they can't call their employees after work hours, or they can get penalized. It's kind of interesting, I could kind of see from 2 points of views where, I worked at King's Chicken one time. I didn't really like my boss. I hated that job. So I didn't really like him calling me too much, but I was also 17. But I also see it as someone now as executive director of the Institute that has employees and has events and deadlines and things that happen. And sometimes you don't know when certain stuff. And it's kind of crazy to me, the idea that you can't. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's Sacramento trying to micromanage our world, our life, our businesses. And when the free market gets micromanaged like that, it stifles the free market. It stifles productivity. There are things you can do to address any abuses that are going on with something like that, but you can't stop the market from functioning. If somebody needs to know something that's going on the next day that they didn't know when they left work, you need to make a call, make a text, do something, but you still have to communicate. It's not taking advantage of them. It's just keeping them in the loop.
Yeah, and it just to me, it seems like there's just so many different businesses, maybe and it's so diverse, right? And like, so on call, like nurses or any of these, how do you regulate, and logistically, how does that even work?
You can't. And this is part of the problem in our whole country. We have more than 1 million regulations on the books, and it's hard to figure out which regulations have to be followed. And when you have Sacramento micromanaging everything like that, it just doesn't reflect the reality of how life works. And so what it does is it sets the government up to be an arbitrary enforcer of these regulations, and they can pick which businesses they like or not like to enforce against. And that's where you get the arbitrary nature of government. That's actually where the tyranny of government comes in.
Yeah. Well, it just, for me, is, for the Institute, we speak to so many young, individuals that are coming out of college. Some of them are entrepreneurs, want to start businesses. I don't know if this is something that will entice them to want to do that.
No, I think it's one of 1,000 things out there that discourage people from doing that. But it's just important. It's like if somebody needs to know something, there's nothing wrong with contacting them. Most employees wouldn't even mind it. There was probably one bad thing that happened one time, and some legislator says, we have to stop this. This can't ever happen. So they pass one law to cover 1,000 situations, and was really only designed to cover one unique situation.
It's California in a nutshell, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
One other, just kind of going into that same business, another law that actually is getting implemented this week was the minimum wage for fast food chains throughout the country. It's funny how not all fast food chains, so I should say that some of them that...
Is that Panera's problem? Or
Panera, I don't, it's interesting how that worked out, but to me, it seems like government's role in so many ways should be, create the conditions for businesses to thrive and then get out of the way. I don't know if that doesn't seem our philosophy here in California. And to me, the bigger story, though, is the people that got excluded from this law. And it's just the example of how things operate. And if you have the money and you could pay your way, it seems like you can get excluded.
Sure. If you have the right lobbyist and the right connections and the right friends with the governor, you can do something that's as obnoxious as what they did and carve out one company. And again, you have to take a step back and say, what are we really trying to do with this law itself? Well, we've already seen that employers have said, hey, we're going to cut back on your hours because this law is going to cost us a lot more money. We don't have that money in our budget, so we're going to cut your hours back. So the very people that Sacramento pretends they're helping, the worker, actually gets hurt because of what they're doing.
Yeah. It's interesting. So, in just speaking on that, so the video that we watched earlier was basically Frosty's, or one of the ice cream places, shutting down. They closed. They had to fire all their employees, and they shut down. And people were reacting. It's like, this business has been here for 30 years. And...
Right. Yeah, Sacramento has this view that businesses are making tons of money, tons of profit, and which many of them are just on the margin. They're getting by, they're eking by. And when you have a substantial cost increase to the production, it cripples them. And some of them have to go out of business. Some of them cut their workforce back. But the bottom line is it hurts production.
Yeah, and we were talking too. We were at they showed Taco Bell. You go to Taco Bell now, the new ones, they have the kiosks. Right. And you're going to start seeing employees. I feel like it's going to be more AI, more kiosks.
Sure. Innovation is a product of overregulation. Mm-hmm. When the government overregulates, the business sits back and says, "Well, we can't afford that cost. How can we do this same task in a different way?" And so you automate, and you get more and more automation. And guess what? Somebody loses a job. Yep. And that's where they're hurting the people they pretend to care for.
Exactly. And you can't blame business owners. I mean, you can't blame them for, what's their incentive, It's just
right. In fact, they don't want to cut back the hours. They actually just want to deliver the product and make a profit. That's the free market. That's capitalism. In fact, that capitalism and free markets have pulled more people out of poverty than any other government program can pretend to do. And so we need to foster the environment that allows it to grow and thrive.
Yeah. And I agree. So kind of a little bit of a segue into our next topic. A story just came up at a marijuana dispensary. The police raided it, found guns, found other illegal drugs. And to me, I remember when I first came here 10 years ago, I'm dating myself, when I was in college. My buddy he went to USC. And I remember visiting him at USC, and he was underage. And he goes, "Hold on one second." Him and some of his frat buddies, I was in fraternity. I don't want to call them frat, but they went and they got illegal drugs. They got drugs from this dispensary that was underage. They went there, and I go, "How did this happen? How did you guys do?" And he's like, "Oh, they don't care. They don't check." And then moving here, multiple times, you hear stories constantly of these dispensaries, these illegal dispensaries, crimes, all sorts of crime in general. So it's interesting to me to see the Sacramento and the leaders in our government here in California go after businesses. Then you have crime, you have these dispensaries. It's just like priorities seem to be a little
They are, and that's the function of the ivory tower mentality of the progressive thought pattern. They want to command and control your life. It's really all about power and control. And the ones that are law-abiding citizens, they want to control them, micromanage them, take money from them. They want to be heroes to certain people and do all this wealth redistribution, transfer payments, things like that. And they're not really interested in going after real crime. Real crime doesn't advance their agenda. Real crime doesn't give them power or control over a system. And so they let that go. And it's not surprising if it's an illegal dispensary that they have other illegal activity going on. It's just one follows the other.
Yeah. Would you say, and just going a little deeper on that, do you think I know there's big lobbyist groups, I know there's unions here in California, but what do you think the one that is really supporting a lot of the more pro-crime, less, or the no cash bail stuff? Who's behind a lot of that stuff, would you say?
Oh, I don't think it's a lobby group, and it's not a money group. Mm-hmm. It's a progressive thought. And right now, because of what we've seen in colleges and people coming out with degrees in gender studies and things like that, all these people are getting hired into HR departments in corporations all across the land. And of course, that's their priority. That's what they're pursuing. And there's I have Democrat moderate friends that get silenced by the progressives. And so they're afraid. They could be pro-business, but they're afraid to do something that promotes business because the progressives come down on them so hard. So it's not a lobby group. It's a progressive mentality that's infected this country.
Yeah, and I think it starts here. It's kind of like that California's the testing ground for all the progressive thought. And you're right, because I talk to a lot of students, and we go to colleges all over. And a lot of the students I talk to don't agree with some, but they won't say anything.
They don't want to be silenced. They don't want to be silenced or canceled.
How do you think we get past that mindset and that? I know you're fighting for it now.
The answer is easy, and it's clean. You just have to speak the truth. Mm-hmm. You have to do what we're doing right now. Call it out for what it is. If they want to, if they want to say something that is woke and so like you're a bad person if you're not following their agenda, you just got to call BS on it. You got to say, no, that's wrong. Here's what the truth is.
So I think that a lot of people are young or starting to wake up, and you're right that the truth, we just have to say the truth, and people are going to see it, and they're because the contrast to what they're seeing in real life and what's taking place, the truth was going to win.
Don't be afraid to speak the truth. Don't be silenced. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the message, and you have to fight back because I mean, there's 1,000 woke examples out there. Even during COVID, when they were trying to shut the churches down, it's like that was a woke response, and COVID actually did a lot of damage to the churches and a lot of church attendance. It's just like people stopped going to church because it was woke, and there's a lot of pastors out there that just stood up and said, no, we're not going to follow a mandate like that makes no sense for us. It destroys our freedom. And when you have people that stand up with courage like that, it gets contagious, and more people show up with that courage.
I agree. And in just COVID in general, I think really woke people to woke.
That's right.
It kind of opened. They're like, oh, even my brother, he's kind of doesn't politically. He's like, oh, that's just a Fox News. You guys just are going crazy. But when COVID happened, he's like, oh, I could see, especially just the draconian measures that were taking place, and I mean, eyes were starting to open.
But see, this is what the progressive left has to do. They don't have a choice but to go down that path. They can't resist it. And so they go down the path so far that it becomes absurd. And then when it becomes absurd, more people stand up, speak the truth, and that's how you get rid of wokeism.
Yeah. Well, especially on our college, you see it all the time on our college campuses, and California, like I said, kind of seems to be the birthplace of it all. It kind of makes me want to ask, you're currently running for Congress. You've been in politics, and you've seen this game for a little bit. What makes you want to continue this fight? What makes you get up and say, you know what, I'm going to keep going. I've seen it, but I'm going to keep fighting.
Well, the same way that wokeism kept getting more aggressive and more absurd in its application, our budgets are getting that way, more absurd in their debt, more absurd that we have $34 trillion in debt. And Nick, I'll tell you this, in 8 short years, Social Security, Medicare, they're going to be insolvent, and our debt's going to be $50 trillion. So you have an insolvency on one hand, and then you have debt on the other, and we're now $1 trillion in interest payments on the debt. Do you know who objects to that more than anybody else? This will surprise you. The Defense Department, because they're afraid, right, that there's not enough money left over to fund the government, the legitimate functions of government. And I'll tell you this, Nick, this is where I'll come back that I think Congress gets it wrong. On both sides of the aisle, they get it wrong. The purpose of government is to secure natural rights. It's said right in our Declaration. There's 8 words in there that often aren't remembered, but we always talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and then right after that it says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted. So governments are not instituted to pick winners and losers. They're not instituted to play favorites. They're instituted to protect your freedom to pursue your own life. And Congress has forgot that. And when you forget that, guess what happens? You end up with $34 trillion in debt. And so what's going to happen with that? Just take that forward. You have to look at Japan. What happened in Japan? They had so much debt. I think they're at like 250% of their debt to GDP ratio. They've had 30 years of zero growth. Why do they have zero growth? Because all of the money is consumed by interest payments on the debt, and there's no capital left over for entrepreneurs to go out and create jobs. And so if we continue down this path, we will look just like Japan. And in fact, we're starting to do that because since World War II to 2008, we had about an average of 4% growth. Since the great expansion of government and the Great Recession and then COVID and all this money that's been spent, we're averaging about 2% growth now. And because all of the capital has been sucked out and $1 trillion is going to interest payments. And so that's the problem you have.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that you said, I think left and right are not doing a good job on. When I talk to young people, it seems like that is the sentiment, that they both don't see right or left, it seems like there's a distrust and an overall distrust in institutions, but there's what would be your message to that? And what I would say is, do you have any other agreements where you think that left and right both are kind of messing it up, and that something that we could do better?
Oh, sure. I think in education, we need some good reforms there, and left and right. I think this new effort to have a sort of a Republican form of government being used to advance your social agenda is just wrong, because government's never going to get that right.
I agree. I completely agree with you on that. I'm going to ask our last question here, and this is something that came up in our video. This week, a solar flare-looking meteor came across the sky, and first on the news they said, "Oh, it was SpaceX. They dropped some parts." Then SpaceX said, "No, it wasn't us," or didn't comment on it. And then they said it was a Chinese spy balloon. Twitter went on Chinese spy. Then, of course, it went into UFOs. I want to just your take on why does it seem like everything seems to jump to the most conspiracy theory? Also, do you believe in aliens?
I don't believe in aliens.
Okay.
At least I have not seen any proof of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I saw the rocket that went up.
Yeah.
I took pictures of it.
Yeah,
I have them on my phone. Yeah.
But there was another something else that came across
I didn't see
the sky.
that. I didn't see that one.
I
Yeah.
saw it this morning, and I
Yeah.
saw the Twitter craziness about it.
Yeah,
And
I
just
didn't
was
see
like,
that one. Yeah.
It just to me it seems every time something crazy happens, there's always like a jump to aliens, or could it not just be?
Could it be our military playing games? Who knows? Or doing exercises? That happens a lot, and throughout history we've seen that. And the answer eventually gets revealed that it more often than not was our military doing something.
Yeah. So I'll actually make this my last question, and I want to end it just on Orange County, since that's where we're here, and that's kind of what you've been fighting for, and you've spent a lot of your career here. We've seen all sorts of politicians. We've had one here, and especially in your district in the 47th, that I don't know necessarily related to everyone. And I don't know. To me, when I look at it, it seemed like her priorities were outside of the district, outside of Orange County. What do you hope to do when you're elected in the first 2 years? And how do you really hope to help Orange County in California?
Well, it certainly won't be bringing earmarks home that aren't related to Article 1 of the Constitution. But I think there's a couple existential things that we need to focus on right away. One is the border. The other is our debt. We need to make progress on it. We don't have to solve either one of them overnight, although you could solve the border overnight. The president has the authority to do that. The debt's a little trickier because of the entitlements. But I think if we develop some bipartisan effort to say, and the problem with the bipartisan effort is so many of the Democrats are co-opted by the progressives, and the moderate Democrats are afraid to actually talk to the Republicans about doing a deal. But we still have to do that. We still have to try, and we don't have to solve it overnight. But if we made 2% progress in any one given year, 5%, 10%, whatever it is, if we show the American people that we can make progress and we can work together, we will restore confidence in the process. Right now, the confidence is broken because Congress is broken, and they're not even talking to each other. In fact, some Republicans don't talk to other Republicans, and they're certainly not talking to the Democrats. And so we just need to come in with that attitude.
I think one of the biggest things young people don't realize is the debt. They think spend. What is it? It's never going to hurt, and you see it, but it's the debt. It's not known enough to young people about the long-term effect that it will have if we don't figure out some way of bringing it down.
It's actually too abstract to put in a soundbite because if we add another $1 trillion in debt, somebody asks, well, how does that affect my life? Does that affect prices? Well, it actually does affect prices. All this government spending affects inflation. So it's starting to be easier to talk about. Most people now know 34 trillion is a lot of money. It was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 trillion. We didn't know what that was, but now it's going up so fast. Every month it's going up another, $100 billion a month, or no, every few days or something. 3 trillion this year alone. And so I think that we need to do a better job of talking about what the real impact is on your life. And I think the inflation is waking people up a lot. But these are the existential problems. It's like I have a 21-year-old son, and it's like I'm not going to pay that debt back. I'm 60 years old, 61. It's just like It's like there's not enough time for me left to pay that debt back. But my son will have to worry about that debt, and his children will have to worry about that debt.
Right.
So that's why I get up in the morning and say, no, this is wrong. And I tell you, there's something about human nature that is really beautiful. If I know that I'm giving hope to another generation, it makes me happy today. And do you know why? Because our founding fathers knew this too. When they said that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of happiness meant the pursuit of a virtuous life. Because the only way to feel good is to do good things. If you do bad things, you're not going to feel good. If you do unvirtuous things, you're not going to feel good. But if you go out and seek to solve a problem for your children, your grandchildren, and you leave a legacy that's better, that gives me joy today. That gives me happiness today. So it's a need that has to be done. I think I'm uniquely skilled in knowing how to get it done. So that's why I get out of bed every day and I go campaign. I want to get elected and I want to solve these problems.
Scott, thank you so much for stopping by today.
Always a pleasure, Nick.
Yeah.